Local programming on KRWG Public Media made possible in part by viewers like you. Thank you.
This is KRWG Public Media, TV, radio, online. News that matters. Now, across the Mesilla Valley and the borderland, the stories that shape our community. From the KRWG Broadcast Center at New Mexico State University, this is Newsmakers.
Thank you for joining us for Newsmakers. I'm Casey Counts. On today's program, we'll be joined by ecologist Martha Cooper to discuss her work at the Nature Conservancy in New Mexico. First, researchers at Western New Mexico University in Silver City are tracking the effects of climate change with the help of a plant and vertebrate library. The collections are used to archive the biodiversity surrounding the Gila wilderness and to monitor alterations in the environment. Johnny Coker has more.
The Gila National Forest covers over 3 million acres across southwest New Mexico, with elevation changes between 5,000 feet above sea level to nearly 11,000 feet. At Western New Mexico University in Silver City, the Natural Sciences Department has collected over 13,000 plant specimens and over 10,000 animal specimens in order to document the unique biodiversity within and around the Gila. This enables researchers to be able to track the effects of drought, pollution, and ultimately climate change. Dr. William Bill Norris, professor of botany at WNMU, explained the importance of having these specimen libraries to help track the effects of climate change.
Our climate is changing, our resources are changing, we're having more frequent fires. The only way we can really understand what's going on is to document what's here now, to kind of lay the groundwork for anyone who wants to repeat this kind of work and down the road, so we can actually analyze for change in an appropriate scientific method.
The WNMU Herbarium was established in 1957 by the late Dr. Dale Zimmerman. According to Norris, Zimmerman estimated that the drought in the Gila has been ongoing for nearly 50 years.
There's a lot of factors that enter into why presumably we've had higher frequency of fires in this region, but having drier conditions, it also promotes basically invasion by pine bark beetles, all kinds of things which detrimentally affect a lot of these trees here.
Norris said that the biodiversity of the Gila is threatened due to disruptions in the life cycle of pollinators being disrupted by the rapidly changing climate.
The climate is changing very quickly, and we're getting long evolved relationships are getting out of sync. These co-evolved relationships between plants and pollinators, and as their phenology, the timing of their emergence basically kind of gets out of sync, you're going to have much more difficulty for plants which require these pollinators for their reproduction to be able to persist.
Dr. Russ Kleinman, associate botanist and professor at WNMU, said that there is already discernible evidence of climate change having an impact in the mountains surrounding Silver City, with the ponderosa tree line moving upward in elevation. More than that, though, he said that the disappearance of species could be detrimental to humans, which is why it's important to have a physical specimen library.
Any of these species that we lose can be a linchpin and can be like removing the brick from the bottom of a wall. The whole ecosystem can collapse. But more than that, we don't know how we might want to use these organisms in the future. Some of them may be incredibly important for our own survival. So when we cause the loss of an organism by pollution or global warming, we may be harming ourselves. We may be losing the organism that might be the cure of the next cancer, or the next asthma medication might not come about because we don't have an organism that produces that compound for us. These things are clearly impacting our natural areas in ways that we know and a lot of ways we don't know.
Although a relatively small university, the collections at WNMU are vast. They show how the Gila's forest climate has been affected and give insight to researchers on what to expect in the future. For KRWG Public Media, I'm Johnny Coker.
Martha Cooper is an ecologist and program director for the Nature Conservancy in New Mexico. Welcome to KRWG Public Media, Martha.
Thank you so much, Casey.
Why don't you start by telling us just a little bit about what the Conservancy does?
Yes, so our mission is to conserve the lands and waters on which all life depends, and to support people and nature thriving we've been working here in New Mexico for over 40 years now, including down here on the Gila and Mimbres rivers in southwest New Mexico.
Why don't we take a look back at the spring? It was obviously a devastating wildfire season across the state of New Mexico. How can you compare what happened in the northern part of the state to what happened in the southern part of the state?
Yeah, well, we both had really big fires that burned this summer, and I think there were a few differences. One is that in northern New Mexico, a lot more families and homes and infrastructure was affected, and down here on the Gila, just because we have a bigger landscape, there weren't as many people in terms of homes and structures impacted. And then the other thing is that this fire wasn't the Black Fire, which burned in Sierra and Grant County, was not started with a prescribed fire as the others were in the winter.
Let's talk a little bit about retooling the prescribed burns that the federal government does. Are you confident that the changes that have been made are appropriate and will make a positive difference in the years to come?
Yeah, that's my understanding, that there's been a lot of learning from what happened, and policies looked at and adjusted to try and not have the way the fires played out this summer in the north. And just even this fall, there was a prescribed fire with the New Mexico State Land Office and the Gila National Forest, and it was planned for the fall when there was a fair amount of moisture, just to kind of get folks comfortable with prescribed burning again. So I think a lot's been learned, and there will be a lot of careful thinking moving forward with the use of fire.
We hear a lot of talk recently about looking back to the ways that indigenous people managed the land. What value do you think that has, especially in New Mexico?
Yeah, I mean, that's definitely been true across the West in North America, that we have so much to learn from indigenous people and their use of fire. The Nature Conservancy is part of what's called an Indigenous Peoples Burning Network, as part of the Fire Learning Network, which is a partnership with the Department of Interior, really trying to support and promote and build the management of fire with our indigenous partners. Here in New Mexico, we had a lot of, as we do now, lightning ignited fires, but we are working, especially in the northern part of the state, with pueblos to do restoration and support their fire management and burning on their lands and on public lands. So there's big opportunity there.
What does restoration look like?
Yeah, that's a great question. So restoration looks like thinking about what the forest looked like historically and how fires burned across the landscape. So historically, fire would have burned at lower intensities, stayed more on the ground, thinned trees out, been smaller in scale. So today, restoration is really about trying to reduce fuels so that when lightning lights a fire or there's prescribed fire, the fuels have been reduced so that they can burn in a fashion more similar to how they used to. So a lot of restoration is about reducing fuels, but also reintroducing fire, because that is a really keystone process in our landscape.
Let's move on now from fire to flood, which is what we saw after the devastating fires. Of course, we have those devastating floods that come next, which may have been more impactful to people in southern New Mexico. What was it like across southern New Mexico following the Black Fire?
Yes, so as you know, we had a great monsoon season, but that meant there was a lot of water falling on these burn scars that were just really fresh. And so the Black Fire burned in the headwaters of the East Fork of the Gila River, as well as the headwaters of the Mimbres River. So we saw a lot of increased flows, initially a lot of ash and sediment this summer, which meant folks who lived on the other side of the river couldn't get across. We had a lot of sediment deposition in the floodplain, in some ditches. A lot of the agricultural diversions were silted in and blown out. That was probably one of the main impacts folks experienced, both on the Mimbres and on the Gila. And so there were elected officials are really mobilized to try and support folks in accessing federal and state funding to address some of those needs in terms of getting the ditches and roads back in working order.
And go right ahead.
Oh, I was just going to say that having a functional floodplain is a real goal of the Nature Conservancy. So we own land in the Mimbres Valley and in the Cliff Gila Valley, in both cases where the river comes out of the mountains. And we're managing our land to have intact forests of native species and to give the river enough space to really spread out and slow down and drop sediment. So this summer we saw the floodplains really doing their job in terms of absorbing those flows and slowing water down. So that's one way that our land management can try and help the ecosystem.
Well, that is exactly what I was going to ask you about next. What is a functional floodplain? What does that mean?
Yeah, a functional floodplain typically is broad enough to absorb even high flows and for the water to really spread out and infiltrate and recharge the groundwater. It also, that as sediment is deposited, it's a place for new cottonwoods and willows and other plants that grow along rivers to get established. It also means that a lot of the flood debris gets kind of swept up. I'm thinking branches and trees that have fallen down get swept up and compacted, and so that reduces fire risk along the river. And then in these active floodplains, there's a lot of rearrangement of material that helps create habitat and new habitat. That sort of refreshes the habitat for fish. A lot of sediment gets buried in between the cobbles and the rocks in the bottom of rivers, and floods kind of wash that cobble and create spaces where bugs live that the fish eat. So floods do a lot of good work for us as well, although certainly they can have other impacts for folks as well.
And getting too much water is one thing. Not our usual problem here
Right.
across the West is not getting enough of it. So let's talk a little bit about the Conservancy and how you can approach ongoing drought and worsening drought.
Yes, so we in New Mexico have learned a lot in recent years about the trends of aridification. So that's kind of long-term trends of drying in our state. The New Mexico Office of the State Engineer and Interstate Stream Commission produced what they call a leap ahead analysis that looked at water projections for New Mexico and saw, I believe it's a 25% decrease in water moving forward. And so we're definitely all coming together to think about ways we can manage for having less water. So I can share some of the ways that we've been doing that. We do use some of our water rights along the Gila to put in a wetland, which helps recharge the aquifer. We also have the capacity to, along the Mimbres, we've enrolled some of our water rights in a conservation plan, which means that they're dedicated to the river, but that also provides some flexibility for the other folks on the ditch if we need to adjust turns or do that kind of thing. So in other parts of the state, people are thinking about voluntary and compensated fallowing, meaning they would not grow a crop and be compensated for that. And just finally, one other program that is getting a lot of attention is the Strategic Water Reserve, which is a program in New Mexico where the state can buy or lease water either for endangered species compliance or compact compliance. So that's another strategy to just dedicate water to rivers for other benefits.
Recently, the UN Convention on Biological Diversity met in Canada. And we hear a lot about goals being laid out, and we hear a lot about goals that we fail to meet time and time again. What are your concerns about biodiversity and our future?
Yes, well, that is certainly one of our one of the main goals of the Nature Conservancy is to protect biodiversity. And I think the way we do that is to try and keep our ecosystems functioning. So balancing water use both for people and for rivers and aquifers, for example. And as we talked about in our watersheds, thinking about trying to reduce these large fires so that there is still intact forest for some of the bird species, for example, or Jemez salamander in the Jemez Mountains, these species that have particular habitat needs, really thinking about how we can take actions to provide that habitat for them.
How many
freshwater? Yeah.
How many species would you say right now are of greatest concern?
Oh, I think there are, just in New Mexico, there are probably somewhere between 75 and 100. The New Mexico Department of Game and Fish has puts out a report that looks at species of greatest conservation need. And so that encompasses both the species that are listed under the Endangered Species Act, so federally listed, but also listed within New Mexico of special interest. So that's a great resource and can be found on their website.
When we look at, breaking it down to the work that's going on a local level, what do you want to see from those higher levels and around the world, for example?
Yeah, I think that one big push is for our government officials, locally and around the world, to be thinking about what we can do to slow climate change and reduce emissions and mitigate the impacts. So there are certainly lots of opportunities there and decisions and actions that need to be taken at a policy level. And I think those can trickle down to, here in New Mexico and even on a smaller scale, looking at ways people can get involved in reducing their carbon footprint, planting trees, driving less, those kind of actions. So.
And how about when folks head out to recreate in wild spaces?
Yes, well, we really think it's important for folks to connect to nature. People will protect only what they know and love. And so we definitely welcome folks to visit our preserves and tread lightly. Our preserves are open to folks traveling on foot and birding. We have a lot of visitors from local schools, for example. So, not leaving behind trash, not staying on roads is our two important things to do.
How does the Conservancy approach educating the community?
Yeah, that's a great question. So we work a lot with partners, local partners. We work with the Aldo Leopold Charter School a lot in Silver City. One of their missions is to really connect students to nature. And so they're out on our preserves. There's a great summer program coordinated by the Gila Resources Information Project this summer that took kids out to the Mimbres River and the Gila. And similarly, there's the Upper Gila Watershed Alliance, and they had a climate eco camp this summer for a week with both local teens as well as some teens from the Fort Sill Apache, which are the Apaches that used to live in this area. And so a number of teens came and really reconnected to the river in this landscape. So we work a lot with partners, since there's just one of me and so many opportunities for folks to get outside.
Well, we talked a little bit about policy just a moment ago, but I'd like for you to take a minute or so to discuss what that looks like on the ground in terms of green infrastructure moving forward.
Yes, so, when I think about green infrastructure, I think about making sure that our rivers and creeks have enough space, that there's place for water infiltration, that we keep our soil covered, that kind of thing. Think about floodplains both along the river, but also in cities and communities. We do know that there will be more intense rain events going forward amidst these periods of drought. And so we need to just make sure that we have the space and natural infrastructure to absorb that water.
Let's talk just a little bit about staying safe while enjoying our wild spaces. What tips can you offer someone heading out to enjoy those beautiful places?
Yeah, well, always bring water. That's a big one. Stay hydrated. Think about sun, wear a hat, wear sunblock, and also think about good footwear. as well as tell someone where you're going. Ideally, go with a friend or a group. That's a great way to be safe and keep track of one another. And finally, always, I guess, I'd just say too, before you get in water, think about the level of the water and whether you're comfortable with being safe in the water.
Oh, indeed. And finally, what are some good resources for people who would like to learn more about conservation in general?
That's a great question. I think I would direct folks to our website, nature.org. I mentioned the New Mexico Department of Game and Fish. They have a website with a lot of resources. We also have New Mexico State University in Las Cruces, Western New Mexico University here in Silver City. So, there are local groups like the Audubon Society or the Native Plant Society who offer hikes and outings, and that's a great way to be introduced to birds and plants and our landscapes.
Martha Cooper, Program Director with the Nature Conservancy in New Mexico. Thank you so much for taking some time to share your insight with us. We appreciate it.
Thank you so much, Casey. It was an honor.
All of us at KRWG Public Media would like to wish you a very happy holiday season. Senior TV producer Christian Valle brings us this Living Here segment from NMSU's 37th annual Noche de Luminarias, which took place December 4th.
Noche de Luminarias has been on campus for about 37 years. I want to say the first year was 1984. I know we are celebrating our 37th annual event. Obviously, we took some time off for COVID, as everyone else did, so this year is number 37. The focus of the event and the thing that draws the most attention is we partner with the Las Cruces High School Band Parents Association as a fundraiser. They create over 9,000 luminarias for us and bring them to campus and help set them out and light them. The luminarias will range from up near the Pan Am, all around the Corbett outdoor stage and the building, run down I Mall, around some of our residence halls, out to the bookstore, and all the way down to the Horseshoe. 9,000 luminarias light up campus. It's so beautiful, and it's neat because it's a fundraiser for that group, so it's a way to give back to the community and invite the community onto campus to celebrate this great event with us. Everybody comes together to help make this possible. Sodexo is also a great partner for us. So we just look for people to come out, bring a festive mood. The band walks around and plays music. It's just a way to kick off December. There are so many holidays that happen in December that are special to people, and so we just try to create a festive atmosphere for our students right before they go into finals, which is not always the most festive time, and for the community to come out and just enjoy time with us. There is cookie decorating and hot chocolate stations. We also have pictures with Santa upstairs on the second floor of the bookstore from 6 to 8 p.m. Posting letters to Santa, we work with the post office. There's a trolley ride. Frontier Adventures is our partner, and we have a horse-drawn trolley that runs for a couple hours. Everything is free. Reflect on the season or how lucky we are to be able to have this kind of event and live in a place that we can do this sort of celebration. For more information, could Google NMSU Noche de Luminarias. Learn more about the specific schedule, when, pictures with Santa, or any of the other events that are happening, the choirs, the band, etc. You can learn more there about the schedule.
That's our time for now. Join us this week on KRWG Radio. Every weekday, it's morning edition from 5 a.m. to 9, Fresh Air at 11, followed by Here and Now from noon to 2, and All Things Considered from 4 to 7. KRWG News is always online at krwg.org, and we'd like to hear from you. Email us with story ideas and video submissions. The address is feedback@nmsu.edu. For all of us at KRWG News, I'm Casey Counts. Have a great week, and we'll see you next time on Newsmakers.